country's wetlands. Studies suggest that mangroves capture 4 times more carbon than rainforests. Meanwhile, Prince William's father, Prince Charles, has tested positive for COVID-19 for the 2nd time. The Prince of Wales yesterday attended an engagement with his wife, the Duchess of Cornwall, at the British Museum. The Chancellor and the Home Secretary were also at the same event. The Welsh First Minister, Mark Drakeford, has also tested positive today. And that's all from me. I'll be back in just under half an hour's time. But now let's head back to Darren and the briefing.
Welcome to the briefing on this Thursday afternoon, 7 minutes past 3 o'clock. Thank you for your company. We're on TV, online, and of course on your DAB digital radio. Well, the Prime Minister has been in Brussels this morning, meeting with with the NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg. He then travelled to Warsaw this afternoon to meet with the Polish Prime Minister. Of course, on the agenda is what the Prime Minister says is a real serious risk that Russia will invade Ukraine in the near future. This comes, as we just saw in the news, that Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, was in Moscow today, meeting her counterpart, the Russian Foreign Minister, and the Defence Secretary is also due in Moscow tomorrow. But let's listen in to what the Prime Minister had to say following his meeting with the Polish Prime Minister. He's been speaking within the last hour.
With instability or aggression on the borders of Poland, then we are all threatened and we're all affected. And I just want to be absolutely clear, when Poland is threatened, then the UK stands ready to help, as indeed Poland has always stood ready to help the United Kingdom. And so I'm very pleased again to have had the chance to talk to you, Mateusz. You're absolutely right in what you said. Much of what we talked about in November has come to pass, and that's why earlier today the UK's 45 Commando unit touched down in Poland, and those 350 troops join the 150 British troops who arrived here in December in response to instability on the Belarusian border, and the 150 British troops who contribute to NATO's enhanced forward presence, and they're standing shoulder to shoulder with our Polish counterparts to bring stability and security not just to Poland but to Europe and indeed I would say to the world. I've just come from seeing Jens Stoltenberg in NATO, where the message I've given, and the one that the UK has been giving to all our counterparts, is that we need to work together now to achieve de-escalation, to persuade Vladimir Putin to de-escalate and to disengage. And as we tirelessly pursue the path of diplomacy to bring an end to the tensions on Ukrainian borders, it's important to remember why we're doing this and why we're putting together this package of sanctions against a possible invasion, why we're doing so much to support and protect Ukraine. And it's exactly as Mateusz has just said, we won't accept, Poland and the UK won't accept a world in which a powerful neighbour can bully or attack their neighbours. And we won't accept it because we believe all people, no matter where they are born, have a right to live safely and choose who governs them, and to decide what organisations they aspire to have membership of, or indeed what bodies they want to cease being members of.
I think that's the Prime Minister speaking in Warsaw in the last hour or so. We're expecting further talks involving France, Germany, Ukraine and Russia to take place a little later on today. Of course, Emmanuel Macron, the French president, travelled to Moscow on Monday, didn't he, for 5 hours talk with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Though little sign of a breakthrough on all of that. The Russians, of course, deny that they are planning to invade Ukraine, though there are 100,000 troops based on the border, whether that is on Russian territory or indeed on Belarusian territory. And that build-up has continued in recent days. We're going to get the view from Brussels in just a couple of minutes, but first in the studio is the Labour MP for Leeds North East, Fabian Hamilton. Fabian, thank you very much indeed for joining us. The Prime Minister pretty stark there in his warning about this possible invasion. I mean, do you feel we're getting to the stage now where it is entirely possible that's what will happen?
I think it's always been entirely possible, and I think that's what Vladimir Putin wants us to continue guessing about. Because I think this, we should be under no illusion that this is a ruse, this is a bullying tactic to try and bend the West and the Western democracies to his will and get what he wants. And he will push it and push it and push it.
Well, because there's two trains of thought on this. I mean, the British seem to be pretty concrete in thinking that, you know, the build-up of troops is a genuine threat, that this is going to happen. Others seem to be suggesting, though, that actually in the end, this is all a bluff from Putin, who simply wants the attention and wants some concessions when it comes to, you know, things like NATO's expansion and so on.
Well, I think both are true, because you can't have a bluff unless you're prepared to be called on that bluff. And that's why there's such a build-up. The information I've heard in the last few weeks is that to invade and occupy Ukraine successfully, which I hope to God never happens, you'd need 350,000 troops. So I think Putin has to persuade the West and NATO that he is serious and he could well do this. Otherwise, it is just a bluff and it's an empty gesture. So it is about bullying, it is about bluffing, but in the end, he's got to be able to carry that out if he's going to persuade anybody that he's for real.
There have been some people attacking Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, today in Moscow, simply because she was attacked by Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, saying that she wasn't listening and that she was unprepared and unbriefed. I mean, frankly, in the end, I mean, did the Labour Party have the Foreign Secretary back on this? Because it seems that some people on the left seem to be supporting the Russians.
I don't know anybody who supports the Russians, to be honest. There may be fringe parties, but not in the Labour Party. We're totally behind our government on this. We want to make sure that we are not bullied, and that, more importantly, Ukraine, Poland, all the countries that were once satellite nations of the Soviet Union are not bullied by Putin's ambitions to regain the empire that was lost by the Soviets when the Soviet Union collapsed 30 years ago. So I think, you know, it's very important that any British Foreign Secretary, any British Prime Minister is part of a collective view here, and that they persuade Putin that we are not going to stand for this, frankly.
And just finally on this, I mean, one of the things that it seems to expose, though, and maybe this is one of the tactics of Vladimir Putin, it is a split in the Western alliance. You know, we seem to have the United States and Britain on one side, France maybe somewhat caught in the middle, and Germany being a bit lukewarm about all of this. So how much of a concern is that?
Well, it's always a concern, but this is exactly what Vladimir Putin wants. He wants to see the West split. He wants to see NATO split. But as the Prime Minister said, no country, and I'm sorry to have to agree with the Prime Minister on this, no country should be allowed to bully other countries and tell them who they can be part of and what bloc they can be a member of and what organisations they're allowed to join. That is absolutely not on, frankly. And it's for the Ukrainian people to decide if they want to be part of NATO, and NATO to decide if they want them. It's not for Russia to tell them. So I'm sorry to see that there are different views on this, and there are bound to be. But I think in the end, NATO stands as one, and we will not allow this bullying to take place. We will not let it stand.
OK, well, let's pause on that for the time being, because I think we've got a clip from yesterday of your question, because the question to the Prime Minister at PMQs. Let's have a look.
Height of the lockdown restrictions in 2020, my constituent, who's worked for the NHS for over 30 years, was diagnosed with a tumour on her spine. Whilst in hospital undergoing painful surgery, her family obeyed the rules and didn't visit her. Mr. Speaker, in the last few minutes, a photo has emerged of the Prime Minister in Downing Street on the 15th of December 2020, surrounded by alcohol, food and people wearing tinsel. It looks a lot like one of the Christmas parties he told us never happened.
But in what he has just said, I'm afraid he is completely in error.
I'm sure lots of people, you have seen that picture in the last 24 hours or so. What do you think of the Prime Minister's response to that?
Well, I think it's quite typical. Instant denial, without actually knowing what the photograph was, when it was taken, who was there. You know, we were told that such parties had never taken place. Then we were told he didn't know about them. Then we were told they weren't parties at all. Then we were told his staff organised them without his knowledge. I mean, you know, the most important point here, Darren, is that people all over Britain were obeying the rules on lockdown to protect their loved ones, to protect other people, to stop the virus from ramping up. And there's the Prime Minister who made those rules actually breaking them.
But in many ways, Downing Street was a workplace. Lots of people would look at that picture and think it's not necessarily a party. This was actually, we've known about this event before. It was a Zoom quiz, wasn't it? And so in that regard, it's quite difficult to work out whether actually this is something that may well have broken the rules. In fact, to the point where the Metropolitan Police, up until yesterday, had decided that it didn't meet the threshold for investigation.
Well, that's because they hadn't seen a photograph with somebody wearing tinsel and a huge bottle of champagne on the desk. You know, I would have thought that changes the view slightly, that it wasn't a party. And whether it was or not, we know that there are so many examples of the rules being broken.
No, but I mean, this is very specific, because this is a very specific picture.
It is.
You know, there are people who will have had Zoom parties over that Christmas period, who would have put Christmas decorations, I'm sure, on themselves, and may have had a drink as they did a Zoom party.
Yeah, but there weren't two other people there. There weren't two other people in the...
Well, yeah, but they were working alongside. I mean, of course, lots of people were not working in an office. That's clearly not the case in Downing Street. Downing Street is an example. I just come back to this point, is that are we at the point now where you're kind of just dragging everything up in just the attempts to damage the Prime Minister?
We're all fed up with this, but the point remains that you have a man in charge of the government, the Prime Minister, who is bringing, as John Major said, and I didn't have a lot of time for John Major, but he made a very good point. This is damaging not only the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party, but the government and our system of governance. That's what really gets me. Most people out there, they're pretty fed up with the fact that the man who made the rules has broken the rules. That's the issue, when everybody else was suffering as a result, including my constituent. But more importantly, all politicians, Parliament, government, is all being dragged down by this man. And that's the shocking and appalling thing. That's what's unacceptable. People have to trust their politicians, the people they elect, and they have to trust their government. People no longer do.
OK. Fabian, for the time being, thank you very much indeed. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Do get in touch. I'm sure you've got a view on this. Let's return, though, to the major story today, of course, the Prime Minister's visit to Brussels and to Warsaw. Let's get more on the EU's response to all of this. We're joined by the spokesperson for External Affairs at the EU, Peter Stanhope. Peter, thank you for joining us here on GB News. Just first of all, we were just exploring a little earlier what the Prime Minister had to say, his talk about an immediate threat. Is that the view shared by the European Union, that this possible invasion of Ukraine could happen at any moment?
Good afternoon from Brussels, and we want to hope that we are not there, that this is not a moment when we are facing an immediate invasion. The European Union, its representatives, the member states of the European Union have not come up with such suggestions, because simply Ukraine is our neighbor. So if something happens there, this is affecting us directly. And that's why we are so much engaged in diplomacy, in the track of the dialogue, to seek the de-escalation and to work also with Russia to make sure that they escalate and that it doesn't come to the worst case scenario, which would be the invasion.
And under that worst case scenario, I mean, what is the EU collectively prepared to do?
The European Union was very clear and remains very clear, first of all, that we stand united in unity and determination to face off this challenge posed by Russia. We are saying very clearly in one voice, together with the United States, together with the NATO, that we are ready to discuss all the issues and the concerns Russia has, but we will not do so and we will not tolerate any kind of intimidation. So there is a huge deterrence being prepared amongst ourselves within the EU and with the US, with the NATO, and enormous catalogue of potential sanctions, which would constitute a very, very tough response to any aggression and violation of rights or territorial integrity of Ukraine. So we would hit back very hard. There would be serious political consequences and massive economic costs for the aggressor.
Are you a little concerned that the EU largely isn't in control of its own foreign policy? Of course, that's decided primarily by its member states, and there does seem to be a division amongst the measures and the lengths that particularly countries in Eastern Europe, closer to Russia, like the Baltic nations or Poland, how far they want to go compared to countries like Germany, for example, or indeed France, that there are genuine divisions within the EU about how to deal with all of this?
Well, actually not. We are united in diversity. It's obvious that countries in the immediate neighborhood of Russia see the threats through different optics than the countries, let's say, at the other side of the continent. So, and also through the optic of their own historical experience with Russia, you have to understand that they see it completely differently. But there is unity, there is unquestionable unity in the EU that we need to solve this through dialogue and through the escalation. And then when it comes to the worst, if it comes to the worst, that Russia does something against Ukraine, that Russia again undertakes any further aggression, then the EU will respond. But the level of the response, of course, would depend on the level of the Russian action, which we still hope we will not see. At this stage, we are united, we coordinate, and we are ready to push back.
And just very finally, Peter, that America's made it clear that if there is an invasion, that Nord Stream 2, that pipeline from Russia to Germany, it should not go ahead, the gas should not flow. Is that the EU's view as well, that if there is an invasion, as part of those sanctions on Russia, that Nord Stream 2 should not happen?
When it comes to possible sanctions and response measures on the side of the European Union, everything is on the table. So, of course, the future of Nord Stream 2 would be also on the table. But again, we hope it will not come that far, and we still will be able to convince Russia that the civilized way of dealing with problems in the 21st century in Europe is through engagement, diplomacy, and dialogue.
OK, Peter, really appreciate your time and your thoughts and your analysis. That's Peter Standard there, who is the spokesperson for the External Affairs of the European Union, joining us live from Brussels this afternoon. OK, it is 22 minutes past 3 o'clock. You're watching The Briefing here on GB News. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to be live in Belfast in Northern Ireland. What is happening there since Stormont essentially has been collapsed? We'll have the latest from our reporter there. And we'll be in Scotland too, right across the UK. That's all coming up in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here.
Joe Biden walking out.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Join me, Gloria De Piero, Monday to Thursday at noon for The Briefing. We go to the parts of Parliament that you won't see elsewhere. Plus, there's exclusive interviews with MPs from all parties.
But quite often, they paper over the real truth. Why does a working class lad like you join the Tories?
That's a good question.
Don't miss it, Monday to Thursdays at noon on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing. 26 minutes past 3 o'clock. Let's go to Northern Ireland now, because the start of this month saw a fresh political crisis there after the DUP's Paul Givan resigned as the First Minister. It triggered the collapse of the power-sharing executive, and now the future of the Northern Ireland Protocol with the European Union hangs in the balance. Well, our Northern Ireland reporter, Dougie Beattie, has been finding this report from Belfast.
The Minister gives some indication of the quantification.
A government with no executive, truly a zombie administration. The irony of it all, a unionist health minister being applauded by nationalist politicians after pushing through an organ donation bill that brings Northern Ireland into line with the rest of the UK. Politics in Stormont have always been tricky, and the power-sharing administration is now on life support. As a building, Stormont is iconic. Its beautiful architecture and sweeping grounds are the envy of any British government. Unfortunately, the foundations of the bodies that were put in place were not good. Side deals done during the 1998 agreement, letters of comfort and continual inquiries trying to rewrite the past are coming back to haunt it. Add to the mix a piece of EU law, now known as the Protocol, that places a border in the Irish Sea and replaces the Act of the Union. All the quick fixes have now gone, and the Good Friday Agreement is all but over. John Kyle met with the Foreign Secretary last week and is a councillor in an area that still bears the scars of the past, and believes the protocol must be addressed to stop a repeat of former mistakes.
There is a level of anxiety, a level of anger, a level of insecurity here. And although people don't talk about violence, if we neglect this problem, if we leave it and let it fester, then it would be foolish to rule out a recurrence of violence. Now, nobody wants it. People are talking it down. But it's important to realise that this instability has consequences in Northern Ireland.
No self-respecting unionist can either support the protocol or implement the protocol. And therefore, if the price of Stormont, if the price of devolution is to implement our own self-destruction, then no credible unionist can do that. And that's why these institutions are in turmoil and disarray. And it is the protocol that's brought these institutions to disarray. That is what has destroyed the institutions, because it has attacked the very basic principle that things can only happen with consent.
Some parties are calling for fresh elections, but with no support from any of the unionist communities, no government will be formed, bringing Stormont back to the very same place. Dougie Beattie, GB News, Belfast.
Dougie Beattie joins us now from Belfast. Is there any sign at all that progress is going to be made in this, or is this simply a matter of life now until those elections in May?
I don't think there can be. There was legislation passed through Westminster just last week to keep this government, well, to keep the Assembly going. The Executive is gone. Basically, the Cabinet, if you like, has gone. The Assembly is still running, so it can only look at legislation that presented itself before the collapse of the Executive. But that legislation that went through the Westminster to keep Stormont running in some sort of form brings you to the 24th, I think, of March before anything could happen. The House was due to lift on the 28th anyway, to then start going on elections in May. The problem being is, even if the elections happen, unionists, while that protocol, particularly the part with the ECJ ruling over divergence, will refuse to go back into government. The Good Friday Agreement was already in problems anyway. There was the letters of comfort that Tony Blair gave to the on the runs. There was Queen's pardons of mercies. There was stuff over the Irish language. Stormont was in bad enough shape. The last thing that it really needed was to be left in this sort of paralysed position over the protocol. Now, the EU will of course say that they did that to protect the Good Friday Agreement, but I think it is very obvious now that what we are seeing is the outworkings of one side of that agreement, that very hard-fought agreement of 1998, walking away from it.
OK, Dougie Beattie, as always, appreciate your time. Thank you very much indeed. Joining us there from Ballycarn in Northern Ireland. You're watching the briefing here on GB News. In the last couple of minutes, the French Coast Guard apparently carrying out a search and rescue mission for 36 people missing, it believed, in the English Channel. We'll have the latest from the Home Affairs editor, Mark White, on that breaking news story in the next couple of minutes. But first, at just after 3:30, here is the latest news. Again with me now.
It's 3:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. The Prime Minister says Poland and the UK won't accept a world in which a powerful country can bully or attack their neighbours. That comes amid continuing fears of a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Speaking after meeting with the Polish Prime Minister, Boris Johnson said the country is absolutely critical to security in the region. He said, when Poland is threatened, we are all threatened. The Foreign Secretary has challenged her Russian counterpart, who says Moscow isn't threatening anyone with its build-up of troops near Ukraine's borders. Liz Truss said she can't see any other reason for having 100,000 troops stationed on the border. Sergei Lavrov has accused Liz Truss of refusing to listen. Boris Johnson has said it was demonstrably untrue that Partygate had damaged the UK's reputation on the international stage. It follows criticism from former Prime Minister Sir John Major. He accused Boris Johnson of breaking the law and making the government look distinctly shifty. Sir John says Mr Johnson's brazen excuses are undermining public trust in the government. Pupils and teachers in secondary schools in Scotland will no longer need to wear face coverings in classrooms from February the 28th. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon announced the change at the start of First Minister's questions in the Scottish Parliament earlier. Prince William has told children in Abu Dhabi they are the future in the fight against climate change. The Prince has been planting carbon-capturing mangrove trees while in the country. The future king also met the son of the Crown Prince, Sheikh Khaled, to discuss protecting Abu Dhabi's wetlands. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. We'll be back in just under an hour's time. Back to the briefing with Darren McCaffrey in just a moment.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion and debate
from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel
right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows.
Every day, we ask the questions
that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
It's basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big hair.
This is
Headliners, the paper review show that won't send you to sleep like the others will.
11 p.m, 7 nights a week. Join us.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Very welcome back to the briefing here on GB News, 24 minutes to 4 o'clock. Thanks for your company on this Thursday afternoon. Lots of you been getting in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Julia says, if this is a Christmas party, in relation to that picture released yesterday, don't invite me. Saying essentially that it's time people got a life. We're all sick to death of this day in, day out. There are other extremely urgent, important matters to attend to. Joy says, absolutely sick to the back teeth of listening about parties. It now comes across as desperate about everyone who hates Boris. John says, why is Mr Hamilton, the Labour MP we had on a little earlier, not addressing the issues that affect his constituency, such as grooming gangs, knife crime, illegal migrants, cost of living? It seems that most Labour MPs are obsessed with bringing down Boris. And we've got another email here who says that people can't take this going on for much longer. Labour should focus on more important issues the public will judge from themselves. That's from Glynis addressing me on that issue. Seems that a lot of people don't care. Do get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Let's move to Scotland now, though, because there's been yet another row between Nicola Sturgeon and Boris Johnson, this time over coronavirus and the curbs that are currently in place. The Prime Minister, of course, indicating yesterday that all restrictions could be axed in England in a matter of weeks. Nicola Sturgeon, though, was saying that restrictions in Scotland may last until September. Well, today at FMQs in Edinburgh, the issue dominated, along with transport. Let's speak now to our GB News Scotland reporter, Davy Donaldson, who is there for us. Davy, good afternoon to you. Talk us through what happened today.
Yeah, the First Minister opened First Minister's questions, gave an update, but the first question came from Douglas Ross, the Conservative leader in Scotland, asking about face masks in classroom, an issue that he's been asking about for weeks. And the First Minister duly gave a response, said it was some good news.
Recent weeks, and of course as recently as Tuesday, I have committed to keeping Parliament and school communities updated on COVID protections in schools, including the use of face coverings in classrooms. I've been clear that we do not want to keep these or any other measures in place for longer than necessary, but that we must continue to be led by scientific and expert advice and put the safety of our young people first. On Tuesday, the advisory subgroup on education met to discuss a number of issues, including the use of face coverings. The group reiterated its previous position that the removal of mitigations in schools should be phased. It also advised that the next step of the phased approach could begin after the February half-term break, starting with the removal of the requirement to wear face coverings in the classroom.
Scottish Conservatives have urged for weeks that young people should no longer be forced to wear face coverings in classrooms for 7 hours a day. Young people's education has been unnecessarily disrupted for far too long. Finally, after weeks of refusing to budge, the Government has U-turned, and while it's welcome, it has taken far much longer than was necessary.
Yeah, there was another clash between the pair about ScotRail. Of course, Scotland's going to be privatised, nationalised by the Scottish Government taking over the franchise of ScotRail. And Douglas Ross questioned about the number of services. The First Minister retorted, saying, with regards to ticket pricing, that Scotland has 20% less in terms of ticket prices than the rest of the UK. The other big thing was today, of course, the Scottish budget. Kate Forbes, the Finance Secretary, coming up and discussing that, and she announced some good news as well. £150 for homes that get a council tax reduction, so that's certainly positive. £150 to other homes in council tax bands A to D, and a further £10 million for the Fuel Insecurity Fund in 2022-23, and that's going to affect, she says, 73% of households across Scotland. So So that's certainly positive news in a time where people are obviously very concerned about the rise in the cost of living and how they're going to pay the fuel bills.
OK, as always, Davy, thank you very much indeed. Davy Donaldson there, looking back at FMQs in Scotland. Well, let's now speak to the Scottish Conservative MSP, Craig Hoy, who joins us down the line from the same building. Thank you. First of all, what's your thoughts on the lifting of face coverings in schools at the end of this month that Nicola Sturgeon's announced today?
I think it has to be welcomed. However, we've been calling now for several weeks for face masks in secondary schools to be removed in the classroom. It's been quite clear that this has been doing long-term damage to pupils and students' education. So whilst we welcome the removal of face masks in schools, we do wonder why it's taken the Scottish Government so long. And we've also been repeatedly asking for the evidence behind this, and the Scottish Government hasn't brought it forward. But the group did meet, the advisory group did meet on Tuesday, and we welcome the lifting of this restriction, albeit several weeks after we would have hoped for.
Is it entirely possible that restrictions might stay in place there until September?
Well, many of the restrictions are due to come to an end, for example, COVID passports, at the end of this month. But the Scottish Government has now announced that they will extend those potentially for another 6 months to be reviewed every 3 weeks. And not just that, many of those restrictions that were temporary and related to the public health emergency and COVID are now going to be enshrined into Scottish law on a permanent basis. And this is a huge power grab of draconian levels, almost Orwellian levels. And this is something that I think is going to be an issue, a huge issue of concern for many Scots as we move forward, because I think, having had a taste of these powers, the Scottish Government seems intent on keeping them.
Well, I mean, you talk about Orwellian levels, but there are lots of scientists who are quite concerned about what's been proposed here in England, that restrictions, essentially all domestic restrictions, could be lifted in a matter of weeks. Cases still running very high. There's a lot of people in hospital. The Education Secretary, the UK Education Secretary today, talking about how he almost ended up in hospital recently because of the virus. I mean, you know, when you look at England, do you think actually they're on the right path? Are you pretty relaxed about the decisions that could be made here in the weeks to come?
I think what we have to do is learn to live with COVID. This week here in Scotland, we published a paper called Back to Normality. And what we want to do is to start to see the system, as I think is now happening in England, relying upon the common sense and the goodwill of the nation. And we here in Scotland saw over Christmas where the regulations were withdrawn over Christmas, but there was guidance to say, don't gather in large groups, and people generally didn't gather in large groups. So we now want to trust the people and then move forward to effective normality, but obviously where people feel like they want to make sure that they take precautions and to avoid unnecessary risk and to behave responsibly. I think we have to trust the people to do that. So we're not doing exactly what's happening in England here. We've continually said to the Scottish Government, follow the science, show us the evidence, and that's what we will continue to say to Nicola Sturgeon in the hope that she lifts the remaining restrictions, for example, a system of COVID passports here in Scotland that simply isn't working. So we'll be pressing for her to do that over the coming months. But I think what is worrying is that the Scottish Government now seems intent on legislating to give themselves these powers beyond COVID, which is deeply concerning.
Craig Hoy, appreciate your time. Join us there from the Scottish Parliament. Thank you very much indeed. The Conservatives.
Thank you very much indeed.
In Holyrood. Let's move on. Within the last couple of minutes, according to the Reuters news agency, the French Coast Guard says it's carrying out a search and rescue mission for 36 people believed to be missing in the English Channel. That's according to the Maritime Authority for Northern France. Joining us in the studio, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, Mark White. Mark, clearly troublesome news. Two things. Do we have any more information on this? And second of all, a reminder that there are still people clearly trying to make this crossing every day.
Yeah, we do have more information. They have now been safely picked up by the French maritime agencies and have been taken to Dunkirk. Now, these were reports a few hours ago of 36 people on board a small boat in trouble. This is not, to be honest, unusual. It's what happens often when they're trying to get offshore from France. They hit the waves, they can encounter problems, and they then call on the help of the French maritime agencies to come and rescue them. That appears to be what has happened in this instance. We believe that they are all safe and accounted for, and as I say, en route to Dunkirk. Now, of course, what happens when they make it far enough offshore and to that halfway point into UK territorial waters is those migrants get on their telephones again and call the UK maritime agencies and say that they're in trouble, and that then precipitates a rescue response from the British authorities. But they didn't make it this far this time. But it is an indication that, yes, they are still coming. Well over 1,000 so far in the first few weeks of the year. And every indication, really, that we are heading for another record year of these small boats making that crossing.
Now, let's move on to, obviously, the situation involving Ukraine and Russia. Lots of British ministers have been out and about, haven't they, this week? Prime Minister's been in Brussels and Warsaw today. Liz Truss has been in Moscow. We know Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, is going to Moscow tomorrow. Prime Minister seemed pretty bleak today, talking that, we could see an invasion imminently, effectively. I mean, what is that? Is that your sense of where we're at? We know the build-up continues. Is the Prime Minister right to assert that this is really possibly going to happen pretty soon?
I don't really see the situation as one that is going to result in the immediate term in any kind of incursion. However, as always with a build-up of troops on both sides, there is always the potential for some kind of miscalculation that leads to some incident that then unfolds into a bigger issue. But that's not the indication really that we're getting. I know that we've had the Prime Minister, the US government as well, warning of the potential for some kind of invasion now for weeks. It hasn't happened so far. In fact, yesterday I was interviewing for a piece that's been running today, an interview with the former Chief of the General Staff, Lord Dannatt. Now, he is actually optimistic. He believes that it has been the strategy of Vladimir Putin all along to demand concessions with menace. And effectively, that's why he's been massing the troops to try to get whatever concessions out of the West. And at the end of the day, even if there are no significant concessions, even just to stick a spoke in the wheel to cause division between some of these NATO allies, particularly I'm thinking of Germany and France, as compared to the approach.
Essentially, yeah,
we have.
And just also, you get a sense that both Vladimir Putin on Monday and Liz Truss today have gone to Moscow. You assume with the best possible intentions to try and talk this through, and have been, we saw this with the Foreign Minister, Sergei Lavrov, earlier on, frankly humiliated to a degree.
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely, as far as Russia is concerned, they've got what they wanted. They're absolutely in the spotlight, the centre of world attention. You have got leaders and senior politicians from governments around the world travelling to Moscow to sit at a very large table with Vladimir Putin. As you say, Emmanuel Macron earlier this week doing just that. Liz Truss there now. And tomorrow it will be the turn of the UK Defence Secretary, Ben Wallace. What you have from the UK and US governments effectively is a two-prong strategy. So you've got the diplomacy, which is happening in the form of these visits by the defence and the foreign secretaries, as well as other world leaders and senior politicians. But you have also got visits, such as a visit to Poland today by the UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, sending out a tougher message, a message of solidarity and support for NATO allies in that region, who are understandably very worried about the potential for conflict, and if there was conflict, what the ramifications of that could be for their nations as well. So you've got the Prime Minister showing this solidarity, saying that, for instance, and in fact we saw it today, a further 350 troops, Royal Marines, arrived in Warsaw. They've been met by Boris Johnson, who has thanked them for their efforts in coming to help at this time. In addition to that, we are going to have both Royal Air Force assets in the form of a squadron of Typhoon fighters, going to reinforce already a squadron of Typhoon fighters from the RAF that are in Romania, and naval assets as well, both off Norway and in the Eastern Mediterranean. So it's ratcheting up, but in tandem with that is the diplomacy continuing apace.
OK, Mark White, appreciate your analysis. Thank you very much indeed. Our Home Affairs and Security Editor there, Mark White, joining us in the studio. Well, let's get more on this. Go to Warsaw now, join Polish journalist Ben Sixsmith, who joins us down the line. Ben, good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us here on GB News. Our Prime Minister's been in Poland today, as Mark was suggesting, an act of solidarity. What is the Polish view there when it comes to a sense whether an attack is potentially imminent or whether this is all part of the playbook of Vladimir Putin?
Well, of course, the Polish government is extremely concerned about what could transpire to the east. Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has said that living next to Russia is like living next to a volcano. So the Poles have been supporting Ukraine with sending defensive arms and, of course, encouraging a strong stand against a possible Russian invasion by NATO allies.
In saying that, Ben, the question is that, Poland's been quite aggressive in terms of trying to suggest that further action needs to be taken to try and deter all of this. Why is that? Just explain to our viewers why that is. I mean, clearly there's a proximity in that they are closer to Russia, but history plays a part too.
History definitely plays a part. Russia and Poland have a very torrid historical relationship, various invasions, including in recent history. So Poland is very concerned about a possible war because it will bring Russia closer to Poland, but also because of the potential for a major refugee crisis. So on the one hand, they're trying to deter war, but I suspect, on the other hand, they're trying to deter two great concessions by NATO.
Yeah, and you talked there, didn't you, about the possibility of a refugee crisis, concerns that 1 million Ukrainians could pour across the Polish border.
Absolutely. I mean, just recently we had a refugee crisis on the border with Belarus, where there were immigrants from Africa and the Middle East trying to cross the border, which was a major situation, but of course would be small beer compared to the prospects of the kind of refugee crisis that war could provoke.
And people do forget that, there is an awful lot of commonality, if you like, isn't there, between Ukrainians and Polish people. There are hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians working in Poland. Many people already traverse that border on a pretty much daily basis.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm right in saying that Poland for the last couple of years has had more non-EU migrants traveling to their country than any other country in the EU, because they have accepted so many Ukrainian, migrants. So obviously, when they have so many living there already, having another million more would be a very dramatic situation.
And just very finally, Ben, what's the sense about Britain in all of this from the kind of Polish point of view? Britain's been pretty outspoken, the Prime Minister, in that solidarity, particularly towards Warsaw. I assume that's pretty appreciated amongst most Polish people.
It's definitely appreciated in Poland, that statement of solidarity, like you say, very important concept in recent Polish history. But also, of course, it's important for us not to take such a strong rhetorical stand that we don't leave the door open for the possibility of de-escalation and lead Putin to feel like it's almost a matter of his pride to pursue war. So it's important to stand together. But of course, there's a limit to the level of belligerence that we should emphasize.
OK, Ben, really appreciate your analysis live there from Poland. Ben Sixsmith. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks.
Lots of you getting in touch to end of the programme. gbviews at gbnews.uk. Alex says, we've spoken to relatives and friends in Germany and Poland, and they all agree that the Prime Minister and the rest of his supporters are a big joke and believe he's making our country's parliament a laughing stock. There's also an obvious cover-up, including the police. He must go. Someone else has got in touch to say that Boris is far better than John Major. When Major was PM, he was just frightened as what side to be on regarding Europe. And Jill says, let's recap. In the last 2 years, Boris has had to deal with the stress of divorce, a pandemic, he almost died, a newborn, he lost his mum, he lost his baby. He is now dealing with a massive Russia-Ukraine tension, and that you cannot blame him if he wants to let his hair down. Give the guy a frigging break. OK, always get in touch, always keen to reflect your views, gbviews at gbnews.uk. That is it from me for today. Arlene Foster is back at 3 tomorrow. I'll see you next week. Up next, it's Brazier after the weather from the Met Office.
Hello, I'm Aidan McGivern from the Met Office. Showers ease overnight with clearing skies as well, and that will lead to a widespread frost up and down the country, with the exception of the east coast, and that's because of the low pressure that has brought some very windy weather to parts of Scotland through the day. That's going to transfer its winds and some showers to the east coast of England, southeast Scotland through the evening and overnight. Risk of gales in some exposed coastal locations, for example, the north coast of Norfolk. But away from there, clearing skies, 1 or 2 showers still affecting western parts, but otherwise under the clear skies with lighter winds away from the east coast, temperatures falling away. I think widely 0 to -3 first thing Friday, but for rural parts of Scotland, -5 to even as low as -10 Celsius is possible. However, despite the chill in the air first thing, plenty of sunshine about. Widespread sunny skies remain across central and eastern parts into the afternoon, whilst much of Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales and the southwest turn increasingly cloudy. 1 or 2 showers here and there, but for the vast majority it stays dry, and temperatures 7 to 9 Celsius fairly widely. Into the evening, the thicker cloud towards the far northwest pushes some rain in and the winds pick up as well. So turning wet for Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, hill snow for a time for Scotland as well as the Pennines. And then the wet weather pushes into northwest England and West Wales by the end of the night. It turns more showery for Scotland and Northern Ireland, but with the wind picking up and the cloud increasing, most places are frost-free. The one exception, parts of East Anglia where temperatures will dip to around 0 first thing Saturday. Nevertheless, cloudy and increasingly breezy for the vast majority on Saturday itself. An area of persistent rain for southern Scotland, northwest England and much of Wales. Showers to the northwest of that, brighter skies to the south, and then widely wet and windy on Sunday.
GB News is the UK's home of discussion
and debate from all perspectives.
To stay up to date on the latest stories,
make sure that you subscribe to the GB News channel right here on YouTube.
You can watch us live 24/7 across the whole world.
You can also check out exclusive content and catch up on previous episodes of your favourite shows. Every day, we ask the questions that you'd ask, so why not add your voice to the conversation in the comments section?
Don't forget to subscribe. We are GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every night at 11 on GB News, we bring you the next day's stories the day before.
Basically like time travel.
If it's a big story, we'll cover it, guaranteed. But we'll also have some fun along the way.
Big opinions, big laughs. Sometimes big